Okay, we will start our presentation here with Mr. Britton. You can't make this up. I asked him how he wanted to be introduced. You know, some guys give us this, long thing and read it for an hour. He just says, I'm a career journalist. So you can't make this up. Mr. Britton.
Thank you very much, Dan. When Dan talked to me, he said, one thing you have to do is make sure everybody laughs. So I got that pressure, and also some people said you've had some Pirates and Steelers speak before. That really doesn't seem like pressure to me because I never look at it like I'm competing with somebody else. I feel in life that your only competition is against yourself, so you can be better tomorrow than you were yesterday. So I don't know if I'll be better than those guys, but I want to be the best that I can be this evening. I'm impressed with the fact that Dartball has been around for 65 years because I've been around for 67, so we're sort of going side by side as far as age goes. And years ago when I worked at the Independent, which it was interesting coming up the elevator, we passed where the Independent Observer office used to be, and I looked in and I saw all the clothing, and it's just interesting how much that has changed over the years, the things that in town change. We've had technology that has gone through the roof. You look years ago, we had manual typewriters, we had word processors, then we went on to personal computers, laptops. Who among us would have thought that someday this would be our telephones? And you get to 2018, and with all those changes, you still have Church Dartball, which is fantastic. I was talking to Dan a little earlier. I said, I'd like to play the game every so often, sport or not a sport. And I saw it in Sports Illustrated once. Somebody said, well, if you don't have a ball, it's not a sport. Well, I changed that a little bit because wrestling's a sport, track's a sport. Is Dartball a sport? And it is, because if you take my criteria and apply it, my criteria is if there is some degree of defying gravity, you've got yourself a sport. And when you're throwing darts at a board, if that isn't a defiance of gravity, I don't know what is. And it's amazing when they talk about some of you who are, I think you refer to someone as Mr. Automatic. To be able to hit a certain spot over and over. The first time I walked into a dartball area to do a story for the newspaper, the first thing that jumped out at me, I looked up and saw all the holes in the ceiling. And I thought, that would be me. That would be, I think I'm going to put that right where it needs to go, and then boom, up in the ceiling and put all the holes there. But just to be serious for a moment, you said at the end of your prayer, before the meal, God is good. The sign is back there. God is very good. And I can speak from firsthand experience. Back before Christmas this year, it was a week before Christmas, and my wife was in the bathroom taking a shower at 3 in the morning, and I said, something wrong? And she said, yes, I feel awful. She said, you got to get me to the hospital. So I took her up to Frick, and they had her in the room. The doctor came in, and I heard the 2 words, heart attack. And then he came out to me, and he said, do you have any questions? I said, yeah, first 2 words, I heard heart attack. And he said, yes, your wife has suffered a heart attack. We're going to take her to Westmoreland Hospital in Greensburg. And so we went up to Westmoreland Hospital, went through stents being installed, and going through that week of not knowing what would happen. And I was going home in the evenings and sitting there in the living room with our 2 cats, and I'm thinking, what happens if I lose her? Which, of course, I didn't, thank God. And again, it comes back to, God is good. She's done her exercises. Things have turned around. She's stronger than she was before. We don't have any children, so she's sort of it for me. And she has been the person who's made the biggest difference in my life, just looking at the things that have happened. But I don't want to go through that somber feeling too much. I want to get on to why I call this You Can't Make This Up. Dan had told me, one of you might know Chuck Schmook. He used to be a member of the league. He runs the clock out at Southmoreland for basketball, also for soccer and football. Chuck is a great friend of mine, along with a young man named Eric Everhart, who does a lot of statistics at Southmoreland. And Chuck used to say, you can't make this stuff up when he'd tell some of his stories. But also Al Michaels, the sportscaster, wrote a book entitled, You Can't Make This Up. So I wanted to mention that because essentially I've stolen the title, but I guess you could say I'm borrowing it more than anything. These are some of the things that have happened in the various jobs I've had in newspapers and announcing at games and so forth. First thing I wanted to talk about was, I noticed you had, was there a perfect attendance award that you passed out?
Hall of Fame.
Okay, Hall of Fame, I'm sorry. Okay, but it reminded me when I used to go to the Youngwood Lions Club meetings when I was working at the newspaper in Youngwood, and they passed out a lot of awards, and I loved it when they got to perfect attendance and they called someone's name and somebody said, he's not here. Wait a minute. So you're perfect attendance, he's not here. We had a lady in our office in Mount Pleasant when I was editor of the Journal, and she received a call one day. You know, smaller newspapers, we cover a lot of things that other papers might not. Somebody might grow a giant pumpkin or something like that. There was an elderly lady, 95 years old, and she had flowers blooming in her garden that only bloom for 7 to 10 days in the spring. So we wanted to get a picture of the lady with her flowers, and our reporter goes to her house. She's got the flowers, she gets the 95-year-old lady, I can't emphasize that enough, 95 years old, with her flowers, and the next week in the newspaper, there's the lady, 95 years old, with her flowers, and the caption says, here today, gone tomorrow. And you're like, oh my gosh, how could somebody do that? Well, speaking of obituaries, here's another one. I was writing an obituary one time, and it got to the brothers of the deceased, and it said he is survived by 4 brothers, John, Paul, George, and I instinctively typed Ringo. It was actually John, Paul, George, and William. And I walked out to the reception and said, you're not going to believe what I just did. But I did, I just typed, and Ringo. I thought, oh my God. The thing that happens with newspapers is that you get a lot of interesting people, and some people would say strange, and I like to think that I'm a little bit of an example of that because you have to be a little bit different to get into the newspaper business. I have loved it. It's been my entire life, but a lot of times it's sort of the complaint department. And a young man walked in one day and asked to see the editor, and then usually, I'd say 50% of the time, that's not good news. And he comes in and says, okay, you put in the paper that I was arrested for speeding. I said, okay, we get those reports from the police officers. Well, look at this paper he gave me, and he holds up the ticket. It says right here on the ticket, driving at safe speed. Now that's the law that he broke by speeding. And he wants me to put in, you know, he wasn't speeding, a retraction. I said, okay, here's what we'll do. You go over to the police station and talk to the officer, and if he says that you weren't speeding, then we'll put a retraction. He goes, okay, and he goes flying out the door, and he never came back. But right on the ticket, you're driving at safe speed. Another time, someone came in and said to me, you know, you cut me out of the picture on purpose. I said, what are you talking about? That ribbon cutting the other day, you made sure I wasn't in there. I pull the paper out and I see everybody there and everybody's in the picture. No, I was in the back to the right. I was the disc jockey, and you made sure that nobody saw me. And he says, you made sure to get my name in the paper when I was pulled over for DUI, but you won't do anything when I do something good and put me in for being a DJ. I'm thinking, oh my gosh. So that was another one of those cases. And here's one, if you're familiar with swimming, you know the different types of competitions that there are. And one time when Southmoreland had a swim team, they were over at what was the old YMCA pool. And they were ready for the race, and the buzzer went off. This young lady comes flying out of the block, and she has put everybody behind her. I mean, she's smoking everybody. And her mom stands up, she's going, go, 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 at the top of her lungs. The only problem was she was doing the freestyle and it was a breaststroke race. So that didn't work too well. Another time, this was a mistake that I made that was kind of embarrassing. How often have you seen a report where they talk about somebody coming out from Harrisburg? Now, if I say to you, there's a man from Harrisburg coming out, a lot of times everybody interprets that as the state is sending somebody out to look at something. So I go to a township meeting in Mount Pleasant Township, and I cover the meeting, and they go, yeah, we got a man coming in from Harrisburg next week. He's going to look at our township pension plan. So my headline reads, State Investigating Township Pension Plan. And the chairman of the supervisors called me up and says, Paul, he's just coming from Harrisburg. The office is in Harrisburg. He's not with the state. And I'm thinking, gosh, you hear Harrisburg, you think they're sending out the state to investigate. So we had to put a retraction on. Fortunately, he was a nice guy, kind of forgave us for that one. This is one, again, you can't make this stuff up. There was a time when we did our newspapers for the Laurel Group where they put the papers together in Scottsdale and we sent all the information down for the Mount Pleasant Journal to be put together. Dirk Kaufman was the editor. He calls me one day and he says, do we have everything we need? And I had a little saying that I always said, we're fine unless the roof caves in. So I said, Dirk, everything's there. We are good unless the roof caves in. An hour later, the ceiling of the armory collapsed in Mount Pleasant. So I had to call him up, hey Dirk, the roof just caved in at the Mount Pleasant Armory. We got to redo the front page. And you're thinking to yourself, how could that possibly happen that way? It's enough to drive you crazy. My announcing job at Southmoreland, I've had a number of interesting experiences over the years. One year, Southmoreland and York were playing the last football game of the season, and whoever won the game was going to be the conference champion. The way the situation was set up, the loser would drop to third place, and at that time they only took 2 teams. So the winner goes to the playoffs, the loser sits at home. And Southmoreland had a lead, York came from behind and they won the game. Well, they're winning with about a minute or 2 left. Guy from York comes up in the press box and says to me, how about announcing we're going to have a great big celebration back at Cougar Mountain when the game's over? I'm thinking, you're just kind of grinding this into us. I'm supposed to come on our PA system and say, hey, all you young people, you're going to celebrate beating us down at your stadium afterward. And I thought that I'm going to have a lot of people walk out of the stadium not real happy with me tonight. And I made a number of mistakes when I announced myself because, we're only human. One time, we were ready to play the national anthem, and I got the cassette. It says, National Anthem. So I pop it in the machine. I say, ladies and gentlemen, please stand. If you're wearing a hat, please remove it in proper respect for America and the playing of our national anthem. I hit the button, and out comes Anchors Away. And that was another one of those, I wasn't real happy at the time. I was steaming. Then you get to the next day and you think about it and you start to laugh because it just gets funnier when you think about it. But somebody switched the labels on there, and of course everybody in the stands had a good laugh about it. And then another time we had a team come in for a girls' soccer game. So I do my introductions. Welcome to tonight's game between our Southmoreland Lady Scotties and the best setter, Lady Bulldogs. And all of the girls from the other team turn around and they yell, we're Carmichaels. Okay, I said, sorry ladies, let's try it again. Fortunately, the game started early and most of our fans hadn't gotten there yet, so there weren't as many people who heard that as there could have been. Another one that I thought was curious, we were playing Jeanette in football and it was halftime, we were losing by 3 touchdowns, and I told Dan, usually when we're playing Jeanette, it's almost like we're losing by 3 touchdowns at the coin flip. But it's halftime, we're losing by 3 touchdowns. This gentleman walks up to me and says, hey, how about sending out a happy birthday wish to our Jeanette coach, Roy Hall? And I'm thinking, they're beating us by 3 touchdowns, and this guy wants me to wish their coach a happy birthday. I said, we can't do that unless our athletic director approves it. Well, I'm Jeanette's athletic director. I said, no, we're not going to announce that. It's bad enough that you're blowing us right out of the place, and now you want to do that. A parent came up another time and said to me, how about announcing to so-and-so that if she doesn't start doing her homework on time, she can't march in the band? Can you imagine some of this stuff if I announced her coming out over the PA system? It's one of those like, well, that's the end of your job. And Chuck, running the clock, Chuck Schmuck, he's had some very interesting things. This is one that I think you'll really like. We were up in the press box one night, Chuck, Eric, and me. We have the most fun when it's just the three of us, because we're saying all kind of things with the microphone off. Just good, clean fun. So we have the windows open. It's September. It's really hot. And Chuck's in his spot, and a bat flies right past his ear, hits the wall behind him, turns around and flies right back past his ear and out the window. And Eric and I are just looking, and then we started laughing. He goes, you guys think that's funny? And I go, well, yeah, it is. And he said, well, it wouldn't be funny if it happened to you. I said, no, but you'd be laughing if it happened to me, and Eric would be laughing. So, it just depends on who it is. But I told some students about that, and they were trying to figure out how a baseball bat could fly into the press box. I said, no, the road. Yes. Nobody threw a bat up at us, believe me. Another time, we had a soccer match against Bell Vernon. And the referee, sometimes I think soccer officials try to make us look bad when they make a mistake. Somebody falls down, and maybe they're hurt. The signal to stop the clock in soccer, they go like this. And we're not getting a signal, so Eric's watching, I'm watching, Chuck's watching. Chuck says, I didn't see a sign yet. I said, I didn't see a sign yet. Half a minute goes by, they'll turn around, they'll give you the signal, and they'll yell real loud, stop the clock! As if they gave us the signal and we missed it when actually they never gave it. So that happened one day, and we didn't get it stopped right away, and a guy from Bell Vernon yells up at Chuck, you cheated us out of 5 seconds, buddy. And the ball was right in the middle of the field. It was like 5 seconds. Anybody who's watched soccer, I don't know if any of you ever see soccer a lot, 5 seconds in the middle of the field is nothing. But he's going, you cheated us out of 5 seconds, buddy. So every so often we'll say, Chuck, you big cheat, you cheated him out of 5 seconds, and that made a big difference in the game. We had an official come in one time, we had a boy-girl doubleheader, and the official had the second game that the girls played, and he's sitting there and he says, if I make a mistake and give the ball to the wrong team on the throw-in, it doesn't really bother me, because it all evens out. So I look over and I said, yeah, but what about when you give it to the wrong team down near the goal area and it results in a score? I think it was 5 seconds, the guy bowled it out of there, and Chuck said, well, you really teed him off. I said, yeah, I think I did. I said, but he deserved it. I mean, he said, if I make a mistake, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it matters. But I did want to mention, too, I'm going to throw in a little bit of religious humor here. And I know you always have to be careful with religious humor, and I try to be very respectful because I highly respect everyone of the Christian faith. And I know that my life would not be as good as it is if I hadn't been blessed a number of times. But a few times during the Easter season over the years, sometimes you read a word and maybe you're dyslexic for a second. I've done it myself, where you think you see one word and something else. So our reader this year was reading during the Passion, and he referred to Jesus Iscariot. And we're kind of looking at each other. Another time, someone said, give us Barbados. And yet another time, someone read that Jesus was taken before the Sangrean. And I didn't really know that they had special wines in those days. I mean, I know there was the water in the wine, but I didn't know they had sangria in those days. But the things that happen on the job, and you really treasure these things because they, when you look back at them, can make you laugh, make you appreciate that life can be serious, but in the long run, there is a lot more good going on than there is bad. Just it makes me feel good to see that you have a lot of young people who are involved with the Church Dartball League, because sometimes my wife and I look around in our church and we go, where are all the young people? You know, what's happening? And I see an awful lot of young people who are involved with your league. I think that's fantastic. I hope that the Dartball League goes on for at least another 65 years and then 70, 80, 90 on top of that, because that's a part of Scottsdale. It's historic. It's great for the fellowship, as everyone said, and it's competition, but it's a chance to get out and have some fun and smile and just forget about all those little bumps on the road that you have during the course of your day. It's been an honor to be here. I feel very blessed that I was asked to speak, and someday down the road I would very much like to come back and do it again, but this is a great organization, and I very much respect what all of you are doing for not just your churches, but for the community at large. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. You actually brought back a few memories for me. Back in the early 90s, I coached Little League. 3 years, I was a kid, but I helped coach Little League. And did all the stats for them. I've always been a stat guy. That's why I did stats for the league for 25 years. And through that, there was two fellows that was doing the stats for the Scotty football games. John Bolta, and I forget the other fellow's name. Wasn't Jim Most. Mike? Sorry? Mike Massori, okay. Well, it was a year or two after I was done coaching, but John worked with the Little League too, and he knew I was a good stat guy. And he came to me, called me on the phone one day, halfway through the Scotty football season. He says, look, me and Mike do the stats. Mike's shifting to third shift and can't do it. Will you help me finish out the year? He said, sure, that'd be great. So we do the stats, right? The first thing he said to me is, don't watch the game. I said, what do you mean don't watch the game? He said, you'll see a play and you won't have any idea what happened. Because you had to know what yard line it was. And I don't know, how many people went Southmoreland or lived in Southmoreland? Okay, you remember the football field in the mid-90s? There weren't no yard markers. There were barely 5-yard markers. It was mud. So you had to guess. And he said, don't watch the play. You'll get caught up in it. You won't know what's going on. Well, there was one game where we're playing, and we sacked the quarterback, picked the ball, running for a touchdown. He looks at me and said, how many yards? I said, I have no idea. I was watching the play where we look at our notes. Okay, it started at this yard line. He had to go back this far. I said, okay, it was 35 yards. So he announced, 35-yard from work. Everybody in the stadium stood up and turned around and looked at us. It was 36. Nobody had yard lines. But another funny story with that, the last game of the year was Mount Pleasant, like always. And we didn't beat them, like always. And the Mount Pleasant players all come out, this was before they tore down what was the junior high. And they went in their locker room, they come back out, the kids start getting on the bus. And the first kid on the Mount Pleasant bus gets on there, drops down the window and yells out, go home all you farm boys. I looked at John and he looked at me and we said, where does he think he's from? Yeah, they're from Mount Pleasant. Go home, farm boys. Okay. Anyhow, I'm glad you mentioned that you stole your title from numerous people. Stealing from one journalist is plagiarism. Stealing from more than one is research. So, you're good. You're safe. Paul, Bart, we have a brief business meeting. Stand up. You're the president. I'll run it. Old business, new business, nothing else. Motion to adjourn. Motion is first and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Okay. I do need a preacher. Pastor Roy, will you do an invocation for us there, a benediction, if you will?
Let's all stand, please. Our gracious God, what a wonderful evening it has been, the fellowship that we've had together. And we know, God, that your love is greater than we can even imagine. We give back that love to you. So we just ask, oh Lord, when we leave from here, that you will guide us home safely. And we just give thanks to you once again. And this we ask in thy gracious name. Amen.
See you all next season.